This part of Kentucky borders a field of caverns that reaches from the state of Tennessee to the Ohio River, and from the mouth of the Cumberland eastward to and beyond the center of the state. This great area is of irregular outline and, as yet, has been little explored. Underneath the surface are layers of limestone and sandstone rock, the deposits ranging from 10 to 150 feet in thickness, and often great masses of conglomerate appear. This conglomerate sometimes caps the ridges and varies in thickness from a few feet only to 60 or even 100 feet. It is of a diversified character, sometimes largely composed of pebbles cemented together by iron ore into compact beds, while again it passes abruptly into gritty sandstone, or a fine-grained compact rock destitute of pebbles. Sometimes the conglomerate rests directly on the limestone, but in the section about us, more often, argillaceous shales or veins of coal intervene, and occasionally inferior and superior layers of conglomerate are separated by a bed of coal. In addition, lead-bearing veins now and then crop up, the crystals of galena being disseminated through masses of fluorospar, calcspar, limestone and clay, which fill fissures between tidal walls of limestone and hard quartz-ose sandstone. Valleys, hills, and mountains grow out of this remarkable crust. Rivers and creeks flow through and under it in crevices, either directly upon the bedstone or over deposits of clay which underlie it. In some places, beds of coal or slate alternate with layers of the lime rock. In others, the interspace is clay and sand. Sometimes the depth of the several limestone and conglomerate deposits is great, and they are often honeycombed by innumerable transverse and diagonal spaces. Water drips have here and there washed out the more friable earth and stone, forming grottos which are as yet unknown to men, but which will be discovered to be wonderful and fantastic beyond anything of a like nature now familiar. In other places cavities exist between shelves of rock that lie one above the other, monstrous openings caused by the erosive action of rivers now lost, but that have flowed during unnumbered ages past, great parallel valleys and gigantic chambers, one over the other, remaining to tell the story of these former torrents. Occasionally the weight of a portion of the disintegrating rock above becomes too great for its tensile strength, and the material crumbles and falls, producing caverns sometimes reaching so near to the earth's surface as to cause sinks in its crust. These sinks, which first formed as a rule, present clear rock fractures, and immediately after their formation there is usually a waterway beneath. In the course of time soil collects on their sides. They become cone-shaped hollows from the downslidings of earth, and then vegetation appears on the living soil. Trees grow within them, and in many places the sloping sides of great earth's bowels of this nature are, after untold years, covered with the virgin forest. Magnificent timber trees growing on soil that has been stratified over and upon decayed monarchs of the forest, whose remains, embedded in the earth, speak of the ages that have passed since the convulsions that made the depressions which, notwithstanding the accumulated debris, are still 100 feet or more in depth. If the drain or exit at the vortex of one of these sinks becomes clogged, which often occurs, the entire cavity fills with water, and a pond results. Again, a slight orifice reaching far beneath the earth's surface may permit the soil to be gradually washed into a subterranean creek, and thus are formed great bowels, like funnels sunk in the earth, Kentucky punch bowls. Take the country about us, especially towards the Mammoth Cave, and for miles beyond. The landscape in certain localities is pitted with this description of sinks, some recent, others very old. Many are small but deep, others are large and shallow. Ponds often of great depth, curiously enough overflowing and giving rise to a creek, are to be found on a ridge, telling of underground supply springs, not outlets, beneath. Chains of such sinks, like a row of huge funnels, often appear. The soil between them is slowly washed through their exit into the river, flowing in the depths below, and as the earth that separates them is carried away from the subterranean streams, the bowls coalesce, and a ravine, closed at both ends, results. Along the bottom of such a ravine a creek may flow, rushing from its natural tunnel at one end of the line and disappearing in a gulf at the other. The stream begins in mystery and ends in unfathomed darkness. Near Marion, Hurricane Creek thus disappears and, so far as men know, is lost to sight forever. Near Cridersville, in this neighborhood, a valley such as I have described takes in the surface floods of a large tract of country. The water that runs down its sides during a storm form a torrent, and fence rails, timbers, and other objects are gulped into the chasm where the creek plunges into the earth, and they never appear again. This part of Kentucky is the most remarkable portion of the known world, and although now neglected, in a time to come is surely destined to an extended distinction. I am referring only to the surface, the skin formation of this honeycomb labyrinth, the entrance to the future wonderland of the world. Portions of such a superficial cavern maze have been traversed by a man in the ramifications known as a mammoth cave, but deeper than man has yet explored, the subterranean structure of that series of caverns is yet to be investigated. The mammoth cave is now traversed is simply a superficial series of grottos and passages overlying the deeper cavern field that I have described. The explored chain of passages is of great interest to men, it is true, but of minor importance compared to others yet unknown, being in fact the result of mere surface erosion. The rivers that bisects the cave just beneath the surface of the earth, and known as Echo River, is a miniature stream. There are others more magnificent that flow majestically far beneath it. As we descend into the earth in that locality, caverns multiply in number and increase in size, retaining the general configuration of those I have described. The layers of rock are thicker, the intervening spaces broader, and the spaces stretch in increasingly expanded chambers for miles, while high above each series of caverns the solid ceilings of stone arc and interarc. Sheltered under these subterranean alcoves are streams, lakes, rivers, and waterfalls. Near the surface of the earth, such waters often teem with aquatic life, and some of the caves are inhabited by species of birds, reptiles, and mammals as yet unknown to men, creatures possessed of senses and organs that are different from any we find with surface animals, and also apparently defective in particulars that would startle persons acquainted only with creatures that live in the sunshine. It is a world beneath a world within a world. My guide abruptly stopped. I sat in trance, marveling at the young old adept's knowledge, admiring his accomplishments. I gazed into the cavity that yawned beneath me, and imagined its possible, but to me, invisible secrets, enraptured with the thought of searching into them. Who would not feel elated at the prospect of an exploration such as I foresaw might be pursued in my immediate future? I had often been charmed with narrative descriptions of discoveries and book accounts of scientific investigations, but I had never pictured myself as a participant in such fascinating enterprises. Indeed, indeed, I cried exultingly, lead me to this wonderland. Show me the entrance to this subterranean world, and I promise willingly to do as you bid. Bravo, he replied. Your heart is right, your courage sufficient. I have not disclosed 1,000th part of the wonders which I have knowledge of, and which await your research, and probably I have not gained even an insight into the mysteries that, if your courage permits, you will be privileged to comprehend. Your destiny lies beyond, far beyond that which I have pictured or experienced, and I, notwithstanding my opportunities, have no conception of its end, for at the critical moment my heart faltered. I can therefore only describe the beginning. Thus, at the lower extremity of Biswell's Hill, I was made aware of the fact that, within a short time, I should be separated from my sympathetic guide, and that it was to be my duty to explore alone, or in other company, some portion of these Kentucky caverns deep, and I longed for the beginning of my underground journey. Heavens, how different would have been my future life could I then have realized my position. Would that I could have seen the end. After a few days of uneventful travel, we rested one afternoon in a hilly country that before us appeared to be more rugged, even mountainous. We had wandered leisurely, and we were now at a considerable distance from the Cumberland River, the aim of my guide being, as I surmised, to evade a direct approach to some object of interest which I must not locate exactly, and yet which I shall try to describe accurately enough for identification by a person familiar with the topography of that section. We stood on the side of a stony sloping hill, back of which spread a wooded, undulated valley. "I remember to have passed along a creek in that valley," I remarked, looking back over our pathway. "It appeared to rise from this direction, but the source ends abruptly in this chain of hills." "The stream is beneath us," he answered. Advancing a few paces, he brought to my attention on the hillside an opening in the earth. This aperture was irregular in form, about the diameter of a well, and descending perpendicularly into the stony crust. I leaned far over the orifice and heard the gurgle of rushing water beneath. The guide dropped a heavy stone into the gloomy shaft, and in some seconds a dull splash announced its plunge into the underground water. Then he leaned over the stony edge and, could I be mistaken, seemed to signal to someone beneath, but it must be my imagination on my part. I argued to myself, even against my very sense of sight. Rising and taking me by the hand, my guardian spoke. "Brother, we approach the spot where you and I must separate. I serve my masters, and am destined to go where I shall next be commanded. You will descend into the earth, as you have recently desired to do. Here we part, most likely forever. This rocky fissure will emit the last ray of sunlight on your path." My heart failed. How often are we courageous in daylight and timid by night? Men unflinchingly face in sunlight dangers at which they shudder in the darkness. "How am I to descend into that abyss?" I gasped. "The sides are perpendicular, the depth is unknown." Then I cried in alarm, the sense of distrust deepening. "Do you mean to drown me? Is it for this you have led me away from my native state, my friends, home, and kindred? You have enticed me into this wilderness? I have been decoyed, and like a foolish child have willingly accompanied my destroyer? You feared to murder me in my distant home. The earth could not have hidden me. Niagara might have given up my body to dismay the murderers. In this underground river in the wilds of Kentucky all traces of my existence will disappear forever." I was growing furious. My frenzied eyes searched the ground for some missile of defense. By strange chance, someone had left on that solitary spot a rude weapon, provincially dropped for my use, I thought. It was a small iron bolt or bar, somewhat rusted. I threw myself upon the earth, and, as I did so, picked this up quickly and secreted it within my bosom. It sometimes caps the ridges and varies in thickness from a few feet only to 60 or even 100 feet. It is of a diversified character, sometimes largely composed of pebbles cemented together by iron ore into compact beds, while again it passes abruptly into the area is of irregular outline and, as yet, has been little explored. Underneath the surface are layers of limestone and sandstone rock, the deposits ranging from 10 to 150 feet in thickness, and often great masses of conglomerate appear. This conglomerate is gritty sandstone, or a fine-grained compact rock destitute of pebbles. Sometimes the conglomerate rests directly on the limestone, but in the section about us, more often, argillaceous shales or veins of coal intervene, and occasionally inferior and superior layers of conglomerate are separated by a bed of coal. In addition, lead-bearing veins now and then crop up, the crystals of galena being disseminated through masses of fluorospar, calcspar, limestone, and clay, which fill fissures between tidal walls of limestone and hard This part of Kentucky borders a field of caverns that reaches from the state of Tennessee, the Ohio River, and from the mouth of the Cumberland eastward to and beyond the center of the state. This great